Good afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are in the world, everybody. My name is Ken Masson, and I am the president of the World Disability Advocacy Group. We're a group that's been around for a couple of years now, and we basically work on advocating for the human rights for people with disabilities. Sorry, my background is not the best today. But I had the pleasure of being with us. Now you're going to have to, because I've been calling you Dr. Sigamoney. Is that correct, or was it correct the other day when Jeremy was calling you another?
Well, my first name is Sigamoney and my surname is
Sigamoney.
Naicker. And my
Okay.
surname is Naicker, yeah.
Okay. So my pronunciation of Sigamoney is the American accent, my American accent on it.
It doesn't matter.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here with you, and we're going to have a really interesting discussion today about inclusive education. But what we're going to focus on today is whose role is it to have good quality inclusive education in the schools? Dr. Sigamoni, I'm going to have to work on repronouncing your name.
That's right.
If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, I am Sigamoney Naicker, and I've worked in the area of inclusive education. And I have a great commitment to creating inclusive environments because I think that education, in a sense, has lost its essence in the world. Because education is about love and humanity. But people today make it a commodity. They politicize it, and they personalize it. And as a result, we have not made significant strides in terms of taking care of our children. And if you look at the state of education in the world today, we have some real significant challenges. Thanks, Ken.
Sure. And what I want to talk about, there are many areas or levels of people that are really have a role in whether that education is quality or whether it's not quality. I know come to mind, of course, people think, oh, the teachers and probably the administrators, but it involves a lot of people and the whole thing to make sure that the students are getting quality education. And I mean, let's start with the government. The government is basically going to start with policies that are going to trickle down to that child. How does that government involved in inclusive education?
Well, to answer that question, it is a state's responsibility to provide education for its citizens. And one of the reasons why the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, came about was because, for example, in inclusive education, SDG 4, we haven't made much progress. So then you have to ask yourself the question, are we up to the task? And I think as critical citizens of the world, we need to play a role in making inclusive education possible, because that's the only hope we have of creating a humane environment.
But but it starts with the elected officials. Is that correct? I mean, the governance that has over the country, if they basically need to make some sort of policies that can be used by the different school systems beneath it. Is that true? I mean, I would think if the government is supportive of what you're doing or non-supportive of what you're doing, that's going to impact that child.
No, of course. But once again, If a international body comes up with goals for inclusive education internationally, and they have remarked a few times in the press that we haven't made much progress. It seems that these governments have not provided sufficiently for their citizens in terms of education. And so, what is the problem? The problem is that my view is that government doesn't understand the value of education and the importance of education. That is why it's not successful. I mean, governments all over the world host Olympic Games, international cricket tournaments. They host rugby tournaments, and they are all very successful because they have a vested interest in the in the sport or in the economic value of these major tournaments across the world. But when you talk about education, we have so many people who are disabled that are alienated from mainstream economic and social life. And you have to ask the question, why is that so? You also have to ask the question, why aren't children getting a quality education? Why are children across the world unable to read for meaning? And my theory is this, that people in these positions don't understand how to do it. For example, if you look at curriculum development in most countries in the world are technical plans. They are not preceded or underpinned by a philosophy of education that's based on humanitarianism, that's based on the context, that's based on the theory of very clever, wise people who have formulated these theories. I'll give you an example. Erickson, Bronfenner, uh, Piaget, Vygotsky are were very good in the area of educational psychology. But I haven't seen them surface in any government policy documents. Bernstein, Pierre Bourdieu, and many of these theorists, what government does is it creates a technical environment and uses its media and its media apparatus to convince people that they're doing the right thing, but they're actually doing the wrong thing. And I think education across the world, or in those countries that are really failing, should go back to the drawing board. Because John Dewey said many, many years ago that the purpose of education, or rather, education creates the possibilities of social mobility. But do you see that in the world? I mean, in advanced economies in the world, the strongest economies in the world, there are major problems with education.
So, and because we're at Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy, our focus is always on the child with disabilities getting a proper education too. So, I mean, that's all part of the government policy too, how it supports that. But then it trickles down. So let's trickle down to the school administration. Is that the next level we want to take a look at? So the school administration is then taking a lead from the government, but then they're now working at a policy that's specific to their school. Is that correct?
Well, you see, you can't blame individual schools for not promoting inclusive education because inclusive education is budgeted for at a national level, or it's budgeted for at a provincial level, or depending on how your country as demarcates all these things. Rightfully speaking, every school should be an inclusive school. Every school should be an inclusive school, and the national government should budget for this. Because you know what? You don't have 100 blind children in a particular area. You may have one blind child. You may not even have one blind child in the area where the school is. But the problem is, Ken, that the politicization of education and the commodification of education prevents schools from taking in children with disabilities or children who have experienced certain barriers, because it drops their ranking, right? Schools are marketed with the top results in particular areas so that they can get more students. They sift, they select and they reject, and they take these children in, and they get 100% pass rate, and they become an elite school. Elite in terms of the commodification of education, but in terms of the humanitarian nature of education, the performance is useless. So it is not the responsibility of schools, it's the responsibility of the state to create the conditions for inclusive education.
Okay. So I'm not an educator, don't pretend to be. But is it not the administration that's setting the curriculum?
Well, that's the biggest problem, because in the more advanced democracies, uh, it seems like as if people are teaching for tests in the curriculum. In other words, they have these standardized tests which sifts and rejects learners, and the state decides on the curriculum. But the curriculum should actually be a celebration of somebody's life and an attempt to establish, based on their lived reality, what are their challenges and possibilities. And the curriculum should be linked to that. But what happens often is that you get a curriculum that's abstracted from people's realities. In other words, it's not related to the reality of people. It's a technical instrument, and it's used for particular purposes. In some countries in the world, I know certain government officials who were middle class and who grew up in elite societies influenced the curriculum to such an extent that they didn't realize they alienated a large number of children.
Okay, so and beyond curriculum, though, also the administration, are they not the ones that give the support for the training for the teachers? Is that correct? To make sure the
Yes.
teachers are properly trained. I mean, many countries do a good job, some don't. So, um, why do they do? Let's stay positive about this now. What are the countries doing that are doing the right thing?
Well, I think countries that are egalitarian or social democratic countries where there isn't much inequality and where there are decent living, where the majority of majority of the country live a reasonably good life, the schooling system is reasonably good. So, sometimes people want to compare Finland with a country in Africa. You can't compare it, right? But where there's high inequality, like in the United States, like in South Africa, even in the UK, the system is not, education system is not performing very well, because the bureaucracy in these egalitarian societies can reproduce the status quo, and the status quo is acceptable because the results are good. But where you're reproducing social inequality, that's where the problem comes, and that's where bureaucracies are useless. I don't think bureaucracies were ever designed to create radical change, and bureaucracies were ever designed to rupture the status quo. They
Okay.
they are followers. They have an hierarchical system. They follow certain rules and processes, and they just maintain the status quo.
Okay.
Max Weber told us about this 100 years ago.
Okay.
It has never changed.
Okay. Um,
So Donald
no,
Trump
no,
wants to close the education department down because that system is not working.
yeah, I don't want to get into particular country or anything at this
Okay, all right.
point. So no,
I,
I
I,
prefer
I
not
agree
to
with
do
you.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
agree. Let's
yeah.
stay on a global level because that's what we are. We're
Yeah.
talking about which systems are working properly and which are not. So um, let's get down now to the teacher. Now, what is the role of the teacher in making sure that there is quality, inclusive education?
Well, you got to provide the intellectual tools to teachers, but you also got to create an enabling environment. You've got to create a system where the philosophy of inclusive education is uh, uh, working practically uh, at all levels of the system. You can't only talk about the schools or the teachers. You have to talk about systemic interventions when it comes to inclusive education.
Hmm.
For example, let's talk about South Africa, where I come from.
Okay.
You have 7 white papers. You have a curriculum and some of the white papers that are not conceptually consistent. In other words, there are very few similarities between the philosophy of inclusion and the practice of inclusion and other programs in the education department. And that's where your problem is, right?
Hmm.
And for us as a country uh, to adopt an inclusive philosophy, it means you'll also have to support teachers. You have to create an enabling environment for teachers. And unfortunately, this is not the case. So
Okay.
remember, I spoke about the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy maintains the status quo. The bureaucracy hasn't changed even a little in South Africa
Hmm.
to embrace inclusive education.
Okay. So once again, though, okay, so and once again, I'm not an educator, so I'm turning to you who has a lifetime dedicated to this. By the way, why don't you tell us about your book before we get further?
Yeah, okay. So my book is about uh, putting out a different narrative. Over the last 30 or 40 years, I listened to so many people talking about the failure of the education system in newspapers, in this report and that report, and so on. But I decided to put a competing narrative uh, which talks about celebrating diversity and talks about creating the conditions for an inclusive system. The problem is that many children in our system are alienated, and those that are alienated in our country are the majority. And their parents don't have a voice, their grandparents don't have a voice. And what happens in many cases is that children are being reproduced by the system with poor quality education, and nobody says anything about it. They are
Right.
just they are just reports in newspapers and commentary on the radio and TV and so on. So I decided to put an alternative narrative and bring vulnerable children to the center and ask the questions of the system: why aren't we delivering? Why is there nobody alarmed at the fact that so many children can't read for meaning? By the way, that's a problem in the United States and the UK as well.
Okay. And the name of your book is what?
Sorry?
Your name of your book, I'm sorry. The name
Oh,
of your book
yeah.
is,
My book is titled Education and the Working Class. Is There Hope for an Inclusive System?
okay.
And it
And,
makes recommendations about creating the conditions for an inclusive system.
okay, good. Then that's good. That's a good book to read to see where you're coming from on that. And it can be purchased on Amazon, right? I'm giving you a little advertisement here. So,
Yeah, yeah, it can be purchased on Amazon. Yeah,
okay, good.
I think we need to have a global conversation about the working class.
Hmm.
We need to have a
And
global conversation about the working
once
class.
again, let's keep the focus on disabilities, children with disabilities, because I know it's a broad subject, but that's the main um, thing that the Rotary Club is focusing on. So if we can, those children, particularly in the children in the working class, and I'm getting a little off subject here, but the children in the working class with disabilities, the quality of education that they're getting there, correct?
Yeah, I think the people that suffer the most. Well, there's a correlation between poverty and disability. You have to note that. And so, those children that are disabled and are working class are severely disadvantaged.
Hmm.
And I see that. And unfortunately, the fact that they are alienated, they still also don't have a voice.
Okay.
And, people like myself who come from a working class background, I've decided to articulate their views because education departments, I think, generally have a fake narrative. I mean, listen to this, right? In the UK, people are not allowed to use the term working class. How
Okay.
can you arrive at that kind of conclusion at a policy level when the British system has a huge working class problem? So, who says anything about it? Who does anything about it? I think we in a world where we have lost our way.
Hmm.
Education is about love and humanity.
Hmm.
And education should always be about love and humanity,
Sure.
creating a better world for everybody.
Okay. So let's get back to that teacher again, and the teacher who's in teaching in the classroom. Let's put that teacher in a working class classroom with a child that has a disability, and that teacher maybe think maybe we should do something to try to improve this education for this child. Is it not then the role of that teacher maybe to educate him or herself to try to figure out what can be better done? What I'm getting back again to that role of that teacher in the situation where a teacher and many teachers are extremely dedicated to what they're doing, and want to make sure that each child is being educated. So this teacher may um, uh, think, okay, maybe there's a better way to help this child with autism, let's say. Is it not the role of that teacher to take it on themselves to try to better educate themselves on how to deal with that child with autism?
I think I think most teachers are dedicated,
Hmm.
and I think that a lot of teachers across the world are helping children with disabilities,
Hmm.
even in places where uh, they are not getting a lot of support.
Hmm.
And I think I know of teachers. I've spoken to teachers who have a great passion and they're doing a great job. But these teachers need support from the school principal, from community organizations, from faith based organizations, from the school district, from the national government. Uh, because at the end of the day, it's not sustainable for an individual to work with such intensity over a long period of time. They will need support. The school needs to have a philosophy on inclusive education. The teachers need to be exposed to training. The teachers need to be supported and taken care of, because teachers are asset for any nation, and we need to respect that and value what teachers do.
Mhm.
And so, where a teacher is taking on this responsibility, we have to find ways of supporting those teachers.
Mhm.
But it's possible, and it happens. And I've spoken to people that have done really good work.
Okay. Oh yeah, for sure. And one of the things we're working on as the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy is we had an inclusive education summit last year, which you were a part of. And one of the things that became obvious as we talk on a global level is additional training for teachers. So we're actually putting together a program that's going to offer that some additional training, and we have some experts from around the world that are going to provide that, because I think most teachers are probably anxious to learn. They wouldn't be teachers. And once again, I get back to that student, and I probably am a teacher, and I'm looking at the students and there's got to be a better way. I need to find it. So it is a role of the teacher. Do you agree? To kind of be an advocate, to try to even educate themselves, to try to figure out, okay, somehow we're not reaching this child properly. We need to do that. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about human agency. In any environment we find ourselves in, if we find ourselves deficient in terms of knowledge, we need to then get in, read, study, and equip ourselves with the necessary skills. And I think a lot of teachers do that.
Yeah.
Uh, when I know of many teachers who study through correspondence, and I know many dedicated teachers across the world. It's actually quite delightful. I met some of the members that you were talking about in Rotary. I think they are excellent people, and I think they're going to do an incredible job uh, in their training program. Uh, and I think this is what we need to do. We need to take care of our children. We need to create inclusive environments, because, really speaking, the 21st century is is a socially constructed fake reality,
Hmm.
uh, and it creates superficial people.
Hmm.
But we have authentic people. The people that you have in Rotary working in inclusion are authentic people, and
Hmm.
we have many authentic people across the world that we need to mobilize and restore the meaning of education and its power for the people.
Okay, great. So, uh, and let's move on a little bit from that then again. So we talked about the government a bit. We talked about administration of the education administration of the school, I guess. We talked about the teacher. What is the role of the parent?
Well, middle class and upper class parents tend to have the characteristics uh, that enable their children to succeed in the education system, because the
Okay.
education system is compatible uh, with a middle class lifestyle, and uh, and middle class people tend to succeed in the education system.
Hmm.
The problem is, for working class parents who do not have a good education, who are often voiceless, uh, and do not have a support network.
Hmm.
And I have a lot of sympathy for those parents. And in my book, I try to do that. I try to be the voice of those parents, because a lot of people in government are bullies. And a lot of people in education in senior positions are bullies. They do not respect poor people. That's been my experience. There could be others who do, but in my experience, that is what I found. There is a disrespect for poverty. So poor parents are disrespected, and richer parents are embraced. Wealthier parents are embraced. Uh, for for example, when you have your awards in South Africa, your grade 12 results, which is celebrated, all the rich parents are invited and the rich children are invited, and it's celebrated. But the children that really have a difficult time to succeed in the system, the working class children, they surface in no award. Their parents are not celebrated for really working hard and bringing them to grade 12. So I think the system really favors rich parents and the more affluent parents. And I think this may be a general thing because if you look at the school ranking system and if you look at the zip code system in other countries, it's a similar thing.
So, and I understand somebody in the working class it basically is somewhat focusing on making sure that their family is fed and all that kind of stuff. And oftentimes, maybe what proper education their child with a disability might be getting, it may be something that they're interested in but don't seem to have the time to do it. And one thing we talked about again in the Rotary is maybe to put together what on a global level what is the basic thing? What is that's a bad word? The basic expectations should they have from their school system for their schools? If we could give them a checklist, maybe that kind of thing, to think about: does my school provide this? Does my teacher provide this? And if not, I mean, I think if you agree with me, Doctor, is that they have a right to speak up. Is that true?
Well, you know, every person involved in education has a right to speak up. And providing a checklist is a great idea. What do you expect the neighborhood school to offer? What is it offering and what is it not offering? And if it's not offering this, what does it take to offer it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So let's take an example. There was a child who was becoming progressively blind in Cape Town, and the parent was a middle class parent, very serious about his child's education, and put pressure on the education system that he wanted his child to be in a mainstream school and get support. And that child eventually got the support and finished matric and was one of the top performers in the system. But you can't allow exceptions. We must create schools in en masse to cater for as many children and as many disabilities as possible. And you know, people use this very odd argument, which I find quite, um, which I really don't like. They say that, well, how is a school going to cope with so many children with so many disabilities? I mean, if I look at this area where I live in, uh, I don't think this neighborhood school would have many children with many disabilities,
Right.
right? The problem is that if a child has a disability, the child has to travel 10 or 15 kilometers or maybe 20 or 30 kilometers in Cape Town to go to a school. Why should that happen? The child should go to the neighborhood school and get education there. It's also good for people who don't have a disability to learn about disability. It's a learning experience. It's a great human experience. We must teach our children to be human, not be competitive from day one, get into grade one, have this competitive performance culture,
Mhm.
have all these tests, useless tests where teachers teach, where children learn tests, and teachers teach for tests, and we create an environment that is so much of hostility, and create an environment that has very little to do with education.
Yeah,
It's all so competitive. We
okay,
got to bring love into the schools,
correct.
respect people, value people.
And that's what a lot of what the Rotary Club, this particular Rotary Club and others, um, encourage people to be advocates. Being an advocate, I think, is important. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody feels comfortable doing it. But when there needs to be a change, to speak your voice and let people know about it when you think this it needs to be improved. Let me just take a second to give a little plug to the Rotary Club. Again, with the Rotary Club of World Disability Advocacy, I'm reaching over from my mouse here so I can bring up my my email address. Oh, maybe I'll just touch the screen. Um, where is it here? It's got a typo in it, but excuse me on that. But this is our email, which is not Gmail. It's Gmail. We're encouraging people to join the club, become an advocate. We're working on actually training for advocates. And we certainly inclusive education is one of our focuses. Many people have many different opinions about it, but we want to look on a global level what we can do. So if you're interested in being involved in what we're doing, you can certainly write to rotarywda@gmail.com and say that you'd like to get involved. And we'd work on, there are many different ways we can get you involved in what we're doing. Um, And Doctor, there's one other area that I think we need to touch of people who might have a role or probably should have a role in inclusive education and the quality inclusive education. And actually, we're working on that too. What is quality inclusive education? So we'll probably put something together, a paper on that at some point. Um, and that's the role of the society in general. Um, and I'm going to be just a devil advocate. This is not necessarily my opinion, but just give me an example. um, I don't have any child that's a child that's my children are grown up, and they're not in school system anymore. So why should I care? Why should I care about the quality of education the kids are getting? I'm being an advocate being a devil's advocate on this one. This is not necessarily my opinion because I don't care. But
Okay.
just say, in my position, why? Why should I care?
Well, then you have to ask the question, you know, what is it about being human? What 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 does being human mean? And you live a short time in this world, maybe 60 years, maybe 70 years, maybe 80 years, maybe 90 years, but it's a short time within the age of the universe and so on, right? So what do you do here? Uh, you get lots of resources from the universe. You get sun, you get rain, you get wind, you get food, you get clothes, you get fruit, and I can continue telling you what you get from the universe, right? What do you give back to the universe? What do we give back to the universe? Is our love, our care, and our appreciation. I think it was Martin Luther King says that we have to pay the rent, or Mahatma Gandhi, we have to pay rent uh, for spending time on the earth. That's the rent we're paying. is our love and our compassion to children and fellow human beings. Why should someone who's blind suffer when they don't have to? Why should someone sitting on a wheelchair suffer when they don't have to? Why should someone be poor when they don't have to?
And we get back to why should I care?
Well,
Or
why
why
should we care?
should society care? Let's take me out of the factor, because
Okay, why should society? Well, society is a beneficiary from the universe, right?
right,
And there are people who believe in God, and there are people who don't. I don't have a problem uh, with people's beliefs, but what I'm saying is every scripture tells you that service to humanity is the most important aspect of our lives.
mhm,
Most scriptures also say to you that service is more important than prayer, service to humanity.
mhm.
We have this enormous privilege of enjoying the fruits of the universe every single day. You get up tomorrow morning, the sun is shining. You go to bed, uh, you have a home. You are uh, cared for by the universe. The sun sets. You have a rest. You get up in the morning. There are fruits on the trees. There's all sorts of wonders of nature that you can enjoy and benefit from.
Mhm.
So why should you care?
Yeah. And there's a beautiful motto in Rotary that I really think about all the time, and that's service above self. That really, I think Rotarians believe that, and you can see that around the world that they're serving people without putting their self into the factor.
You're a good example of that, Ken. If I have to say
Yeah,
that, you're a good example. You go out of your way, and there's a lot of people that do that, but and it's a wonderful thing. That's how all human beings should be.
hmm,
We should feel the pain of others.
yeah, um, and again, the other factor that this club brings into it, and many clubs do, is advocacy. Feel the pain, but then do something about it. Do
Yeah,
something about it. Yeah.
and you do.
The, we That's our goal. I mean, that's and I believe that's to be true. Um, Maybe if you're not necessarily have the qualities of an advocate, um, you can find somebody who does and maybe work with you on it. So that's what I get back again to. That child or children, particularly with disabilities who are in the education system, um, it's um, it's a it's a I'm not sure it's a responsibility. Maybe you would use that word of society to make sure that child is being properly educated.
Yeah, I mean, it's all our responsibility to care for humanity.
Mhm.
And in cases where children are disabled, I worked in the field of at quite a senior level, so I used to see and meet a lot of parents, and the parents have so much of pain. It is such a challenge for them, and when you feel that pain that the parent feels, you know that you have to do what you have to do to help the parent and the child. The parents struggle a lot. In my career, I found that parents find it extremely difficult and challenging, and I understood that. And it is not an easy thing, but they need lots of support. The parents need a lot of support, and systems of education across the world must make sure that they do the best for the children to make the parents' lives easier.
Mhm. No, absolutely. And God bless the teachers of the world, really.
Of course, of course.
The work they do is unmeasurable.
I have,
Um,
I have I have great respect for teachers. I think teachers are undervalued. I think teachers should command a much higher salary across the world. I think they do a far more important job. I mean, why do CAs get paid so much of money? Why do engineers get paid so much of money? Why do airline pilots get paid so much of money and teachers get such a low salary that many of them often struggle to live across the world,
mhm,
right? In many countries.
mhm,
And the salary of a teacher should uh, be able to compensate for that important task that they do.
mhm,
And I can never understand this. How decisions are made about salaries. For example, in the bureaucracies, the salaries are enormous. What value are some people adding in the bureaucracy or in the system compared to a teacher in a classroom, in a
mhm.
township, maybe, or
Mhm.
wherever? It is such a huge responsibility. I think teachers are undervalued generally
Yeah,
because I
right
don't think
here.
people I don't think people understand what a teacher's responsibility is in the 21st century.
Well, and you look at the teacher for the inclusive education teachers, special needs teachers. What they need to their knowledge of the different kinds of disabilities um, is mind-boggling. Sometimes, when you think about the fact that for a teacher to understand how to deal with somebody's cerebral palsy, or somebody to deal with autism, or somebody who's blind or deaf, and how to best educate them. God bless them for those that have that knowledge to know how to do
Of
that.
course.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so it's been a fascinating conversation. We wanted to kind of just to stimulate some thought here for people, and I think we did. And I'm looking forward to continue to work with you, Doctor, and particularly on our inclusive education. And once again, I'm going to just close with if you want to get involved in what we're doing in the Rotary Club World Disability Advocacy and to work with people like Dr. Sigamoney, Rotary WDA at gmail.com, Rotary WDA at gmail.com. Write to us, and we'd love to have you on board and part of what we're doing here. So thank you very much, sir. It's always a pleasure talking to you. I like how you stimulate my brain, and we much appreciate you being a member of the club and continue to help us all open our minds to and think other ways. We need to get out of the box. I guess that's the expression. And
No,
think
thank you,
about
Ken.
okay.
I can, if I'm allowed to say this, I just think that you inspire me and you inspire a lot of people, and I really respect your commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, take care, everybody. I hope you have a good day.
Take care. Thank you. Bye. Bye.